Welcome back to Lessons for Life. It's Saturday night. The great religion of Islam, 1 billion strong, has been divided for centuries along tribal lines that we call Shia and Sunni. And we've got two members of those respective sects tonight, and we're going to explore the differing opinions on the end times or eschatology, what's going to happen when the world ends. We've got Omar X in the middle, and on the far right, so to speak, we've got Mac. And Mac, open the batting for us. What is the Shia take on what's going to happen at the end of the world? Who are the main characters? Who wins? What's the Shia version of eschatology?
Right. We do believe in a figure that's been alive since, I think, the 14th. Well, you could say, I didn't actually research the date, but you could say it's from 1400 years ago, more or less. Yes, they do believe he is in occultation or in hiding.
We're talking about the Mahdi, right?
The Mahdi. Now,
Mahdi meaning guided one. Okay.
Well, we do actually refer to him, not just the guided one, but we do mean Mahdi as in the 12th Imam. Now, his name happens to be Mahdi. He even says, "My name will be the the prophecy is, my father's name will be like the Rasulullah's name, and my name will be like and his name." Rasulullah said his name will be like my name, and his father's name will be like my name, Abdullah. But following it,
and this Imam went into hiding, and you're waiting for him to return at the end times.
Yes, that's their I think background belief that he is gotten into hiding, like as we would say Jesus has, and he is going to come back with around the same time as Jesus, and this is when the reappearance of Jesus will be, and then they will both, I think, will be in Mecca, and then Jesus would pray behind him apparently at this point.
Okay, so this figure, the Mahdi, this apocryphal figure who will return at the end times, you believe him to be the 12th Imam in the chain of succession after Ali, who was meant to be the leader after the Prophet passed away. This is the Shia belief, and you believe it is the actual man. In fact, he was a boy when he disappeared. Is that right?
Well, yes, we believe, because looking at the history of, for example, going back to give you an example, the most brutal one is Imam Hussein, right? Not giving bay'ah led to his demise. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So now, taking in mind that every Imam after Imam Hussein felt like they had a target on their back, which is what happened to, obviously, I mean, all of them were either poisoned. Imam Ali was obviously hit in the head with a sword, poisonous sword, and Imam Hussein was brutally killed, surrounded, ambushed, and the rest of the Imams were poisoned, including Imam Mehdi's father. But however, the Imam Mehdi is still in quotation.
All right, Omar X, I'm going to bring you in. As a Sunni Muslim, believing, practicing, are you waiting for a Mahdi to come? And is it Imam Mahdi or just a Mahdi?
Can I say what a tragedy it is that we have this sect? Islamically, if you were to ask a Sunni Muslim, they'll tell you that, look, we have the Quran, we have the Hadith, and it kind of ends there. The rest, anyone could say. If I was around the time of the sixth Imam or the 6-year-old Imam who disappeared, could he have been a victim of child abduction? And then somebody had to say, hey, he is now in inoculation or something. Could he have been kidnapped? So this, maybe it wasn't the 6th, maybe it was the 3rd, maybe it was the 20th. So we get into this, and there's nothing verbatim that we can say. Now we have the Holy Quran.
Sorry, I was
Nothing
just
in
going to
there.
say, there is the Ismailis who continued after the 12th Imam, and they said that the 50th Imam is...
They are the Seveners. The Ismailis are the Sevener Muslim Shia, and the Twelvers are the mainstream Shia. Yes, the Ismailis stopped counting after 7. I think the Zaydis stopped counting after 5. So it split off again and again and again. Omar X seems to begrudge the fact that the religion split. But on a personal note, Omar X, do you believe in a Mahdi? Is this figure something unique to the Shia tradition, or is there a Mahdi that you are waiting for?
I'm sorry, the line you kind of froze there, but I get the gist of what you're saying.
Are you waiting for a Mahdi yourself?
No, sir. Mahdi doesn't necessarily mean a person will come. Now, if it brings the two different sects together, I'm happy to accept it or capitulate. I don't have an issue with that. But Mahdi could just be a saying, just could be a statement. If I was around the time of Mahdi, I could have said that, hey, something terrible has happened to the Imam, or an army, or like they kidnapped. Many people get kidnapped. Maybe one of the Imams was kidnapped. And then from there, people said, hey, he can't, something happened and he is so powerful and he's disappeared and he's going to return and so on. But I also admit that I could be completely wrong. If there is a troublemaker of that time, when there's always been some people who partake in trouble, they could have easily come up with something. And today we could still come up with something.
Sorry.
Phones off, please. Omar, I want to ask you, in your tradition, is there a concept of Mahdi? Forget about this figure in Shia Islam who was an Imam and who disappeared. Are the Sunni Muslims, and I understand many of them, if not most of them, are waiting for some kind of Mahdi? Maybe not that particular one, but are there not hadiths and prophecies that say before Jesus returns, who you're also waiting for, an Imam will come to lead the people, and this Imam is known as the Mahdi, or the guided one? And there have been many figures throughout history who have emerged and claimed that they were that particular Mahdi. We spoke to the followers of one of the claimants from last night. In Sudan, there was a Nubian about 200 years ago who emerged and said that he was the Mahdi, and he led a revolt against the British occupation in Egypt. Egypt is a majority Sunni country. Are there not Sunnis who are waiting for an Imam Mahdi?
Well, also in the 60s, I think from Ethiopia, we had the man who claimed that he was the Mahdi when there was a siege in the Kaaba in Mecca. I believe it was in 62 or something along those lines.
I think it was in, if I remember rightly, it was the
70s.
Juhayman al-Ataybi who occupied it in 1979. That's if memory serves me correctly. Off the top of my head. Now that happened in 1979, and the reaction was a siege
of the Kaaba.
That's right.
I
remember there's a clip of I can't remember which scholar it is talking about it, and he's saying that people were actually scared at the time, and the military were scared to take this usurper on, because if it had been the Mahdi, the army that challenges him is going to be swallowed up into a great sinkhole in the earth. And there were people that weren't sure. I mean, you wouldn't want to gamble your life, would you, unless you were entirely sure this is not the Mahdi? And people have come forward and claimed to be this figure. There must be belief strong enough for followers to go with it. Otherwise, it would have been impossible, right?
Well, what it is, can I weigh in there? Even though I know the story behind this.
Yeah.
It's because of there's certain well, they've given certain guidelines where what he looks like, what bloodline he's from, where he's going to be. The only thing that wasn't established was when his reappearance is due. Everything else was they got a close relative of Rasulullah who fell under all of these categories or criteria, should we say, that has to happen. Now, the only problem I find with Omar X, can I cross-examine you for a minute? Yeah?
Yeah, please.
So your belief is that the Mahdi might not exist as of yet. He could be possibly due to be born.
Well, he could have come in maybe 500, 400 years ago. He could have come 300 years ago. Maybe he wouldn't be here. Maybe he's not going to come. Maybe the Prophet was referring to a time that's going to come where...
But I thought the Mahdi comes at the end times. Wouldn't it be the end of the world then? And Armageddon?
No. Can I just answer another question? Okay. Do you believe in the hadith where it says that Hazrat Isa will return after 2,000 years? You believe he'll return?
Sorry, who would return? Jesus.
Jesus. So do
after
you have
2,000 years? Well, if he is going to return 2,000 years, he's 20 years too late, isn't he?
No.
Well, he died when he was 33. So.
But well, not 2,000 years on the dot, but we're saying if he was to reappear in, say, for example, 2,500 years time after being born, yeah, so that's in 500 years time. So, do you have that belief that he still can reappear?
Well, we're going on the line of hocus pocus and this type of thing. The hadith that you mentioned is really questionable. When the Prophet said Jesus will return, that hadith, if you were to research it and where it goes back to, I hear that it's not as accurate as it is deemed out to be today. But what did the Prophet really mean? Could he have meant that, hey, there's gonna come a time in the future, and as Julian said correctly, the end of time. Now, my point to you on that basis is, are we not at the end of times? Were we not at the end of times 2,000 years ago? Time's ending, we're all dying as each minute goes by. So could that be a reference that, hey, there's gonna be a time where there would be peace in the land and everyone will be peaceful, and the same time that Jesus, after his demise, if he has demise, knew of and perhaps had a feeling of there was peace around the world, that time is going to come. It doesn't necessarily mean a man's going to turn up with curly hair, wearing a long Arabic type clothing and with blonde hair and blue eyes and walk down the street and say, hey, I'm Jesus, everyone stop drinking. Who's going to even believe if there is Jesus? Who's going to say, hey, I'm...
Got to say, Omar, you're not giving us what the mainstream tell us is the Sunni perspective on this. Maybe you are closer to the truth. I thought that the doctrine was that these hadiths say Jesus is on the way back and he's going to break the cross and various other predictions about what he will do. And prior to his return, we have the Mahdi. But we've lost Triple T. We'll get him back on in a moment. Mac, are you surprised at Triple T's perspective on this?
Well, the way they view it is I guess different too, because like I said, from what I've heard, that they still believe that their Imam Mahdi. Well, firstly, I gotta say, when we say the 12 Imams, we We know that they're not a prophet, but we do say that with Imam Ali saying, when you have he says, be the flower that gives fragrance to the hand that destroys it. Right? So
I remember you've quoted that before on here. Yeah.
yeah. So with this ideology, how can we not think that this person to be, maybe if we don't want to agree to say he's infallible, but close enough to someone who is infallible with this kind of ideology, to say, be the flower that gives fragrance even to the hand that crushes it. You see what I mean? So this is where I personally think now, whether Imam Mahdi, because this is this, I believe the mainstream Sunni belief is that Imam Mahdi will need to be forgiven by Allah overnight or something because he's not infallible. But there's some sources that do say that, apparently, if I'm not mistaken.
This is from Wikipedia, so it's not gospel, as it were. But the common opinion among Sunni Muslims is that the Mahdi is an expected ruler sent by God before the end times to re-establish righteousness, and it coincides with the second coming of Jesus. But unlike most Shia traditions, Sunni Islam often does not believe the Mahdi has already been born. Sunnis in general reject the 12 Shiite principle of the Mahdi's occultation. So the consensus among Sunnis generally is that there is a figure to come. He will be a righteous leader. We don't know who he is. We don't know if he's been born yet or not. Whereas the Shia have a much more accurate picture of who they think this is. But Omar, this is not doctrinal for you. This doesn't seem to be part of your creed, so to speak. Are you rejecting it as a concept?
When you get to the age of around 40, you have to start to think a bit differently. Now, I can forgive those people who were born in different sects and different faiths. We have the Ahmadiyya movement, who do excellent work, and I think we had 4 books of Mirza Ahmed, excellent books and perfectly in line with Islam. On the 5th book, he started to write that he is Jesus and he is the Mahdi and so many other things which were very strange. And that year was the same year that the British, 1880, have a letter in the museum by one of the main generals who said, look, if we can control the leaders that these people in India, British India at the time, seem to be almost seeing as divine, if we can just somehow control them, we can control the masses of the people. So and you know, there comes a time where somebody has to say, hold on, something just doesn't add up. Furthermore, we have Elijah Muhammad, we had Father Divine, we had so many people claiming this righteousness and claiming to be messengers and imams and so on. I'm saying we've got bigger issues. We've got homelessness. We've got forced marriages in the Muslim community all over the world. We've got honor killings where Muslims, Shia and Sunni, kill their daughters for not wanting to marry who the father chooses for them to marry. We've got drug dealing, heroin addicts, we've got heroin dealers. We've got domestic violence on such a high level you wouldn't believe. We have so many problems, and never do you hear anyone hardly mention these issues. In fact, if you were to bring them up, you would be seen as a troublemaker when you are stating facts. No one mentioned these, but yet everyone's worried about some imam who was 6 years old when he vanished and is going to return 1 billion trillion years later. We won't be here. I say, let the Mahdi return. How does it concern us? Let us get on with what we need to get on with right here in 2020.
What about if I told you the Shia belief is Mahdi's answer relies on people like yourself? Because if he sees the Muslim Umayyad not united, it's a troubled time for him to come. So from the Shia belief is hopefully that is one of the major things that he will do is that the unity between the Sunni and Shia will come together, because eventually they do reach to the same, whether it be Mahdi from this from 1400 years ago, or whether it be your own belief on Mahdi. But if it's the same character, to be claiming the end time character who's to be side by side, should we say, with Christ. So if we eventually come to the understanding that because if Isa's going to come and get rid of the Dajjal, what would be Mahdi's main role? This is where you got to see his main role then plays, where it's to unite the Umayyad, the Muslims, because at the end of the day, the Christ is there to deal with the Antichrist, right?
Omar,
Well,
what was the significance of you mentioning British-ruled India at the time? Are you saying that this leader emerged to resist the British, as it was the case in Sudan when the Mahdi rose up against the British control of Egypt? Or are you saying this was someone planted there to control the people? I believe one of the first changes that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad made to the religion was that he said that jihad is cancelled. We do not fight back anymore. We have become pacifists. Are you saying that the British were encouraging pacifist ideas whilst oppressing and occupying a people?
this, as you may well know, that jihad isn't necessarily a struggle with weapons. It's a part of faith. It's a struggle when you get out of bed. But in that time,
Yeah.
you are right. It was something which had a different nature to it. My reference to him was simple. His books, if you were ever to read them, you'll know that they are perfectly in line with Islam. The book that you mentioned, aptly named Jihad, simply said, look, we can't take them on. There were 400,000 Britishers that took over 400 million Indians. It's impossible unless there was rule. Somehow, something was going on behind the lines. And with Ghulam Mirza, perfect, everything Islamic, all of a sudden he says, no, we need to accept them. They are us, we are them, kind of thing. And furthermore, there are letters in the British History Museum and beyond that state we need to control the leaders. Now you have 24,000 princes. Where do they come from? The princes, Mountbatten, when he left, he said, look, I'm sorry, in 48, he said, look, I'm sorry, I don't have a job for you. 24,000, what were they doing? 24,000 princes were controlling the masses. It was impossible for a few thousand Britishers in certain regions of India to control so many people the way they did. And it was a bloody history that Britain left in that land. India was one of the richest countries on earth, where they had, some say, majority of the world's wealth there in that country. And when they left in 48, people were starving to death. And unfortunately, people like Mirza sold out, it seems. And I say that respectfully. And I say that the Ahmadiyya Muslims are excellent Muslims. They do, when I was in Washington, D.C., they do a lot of good work. But it's difficult to accept them in Islam after all these statements. I'm not saying that any harm should come to them or anything like that. When you had WWF, when the Ultimate Warrior, and that happens to be my WWF name, not
Alter ego.
Ultimate Warrior, but Ultimate Warrior, when they were doing their thing, and Hulk Hogan and all these people, and it was called WWF. Now, what happened? Why is it called WWE today? Because WWF said, hey, hold on a second. We are this. Where are you coming from? You can't change what we have. Now, similarly, I would say to them, look, Islam's been running for 1400 years. We have some sects, but not too different. Pretty much we're on the same boat. We all accept the same kind of things, the last messenger and the last prophet. Now, if somebody comes along and says, hey, do this, Ghulam Muhammad Mirza is Jesus and he's the last messenger and he's the last prophet and so on. And we have an issue. I don't want any harm to come to them, but I would like them to change from Ahmadiyya Islam. Just simply call your faith Ahmadiyya and we can live happily ever after.
Wow, there you go. And do you extend the same line of thought to your Shia brothers, or are they close enough to be accepted without having to change from the trademark name from WWF to WWE? I mean, where do you draw the line?
Well, the line is drawn when there is trouble. I look at it at that. If people want, we have the legendary, one of the greatest Shia people I've ever had the pleasure of meeting, a scholar in his own right, namely Modine from Speaker's Corner, a legend he is. I wish we could have him on here.
Yeah.
A man who wants peace. And I wish the Shia people wouldn't focus so much on the Imams. I understand they were born with it, they live with it, and I respect that. And, you know, who knows, maybe everything they say is correct. But I wish that they would kind of reject. You won't hear Sunni Muslims overall in the majority. I believe it's 85% of Muslims are Sunni, perhaps. You won't hear them really too focused on Sunni. They wouldn't call, hey, are you Muslim? We wouldn't say, yeah, I'm a Sunni Muslim. It would just be Muslim. I'm not sure I see more of the Shia Muslims focusing on Shia. I say, look, you say Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, was the greatest human being that ever lived. Now, someone had to be the greatest. Muslims, billions of people around the world say it was Muhammad, and everyone accepts that out the billions. Let me ask you this. He was the greatest, yes, but he was a terrible judge of character. If he thinks that he spent 50 years with his best friends, Omar, Farouk, Abu Bakr, Ali, Osman, especially Abu Bakr and Omar.
But weren't they calling him delusional on his deathbed?
If they were, then the Prophet was a terrible judge of character. Because he spent 50 years with these people and he's not even dead yet and they're insulting him. That can't be right. Something has to be wrong. Something has to be wrong. Did somebody lie and say they're calling him delusional? Maybe they, you know, most likely they didn't.
No,
who would say that?
The rest of the Sahabas
stated that, yeah, but I assume perhaps out of jealousy, so perhaps out of something else, or perhaps they didn't. Point is, you've lived with a person.
The Prophet said, "Let me name the successor," and then the response, I think Omar was like, don't. Why are you talking? You're on your deathbed. You're delusional. Even you can't be one hand. You're right. It's a judge of character, but this is you can't expect. For example, Imam Ali doesn't see the bad, like he wouldn't want to see how can I say, the negatives of people. He would try and cover it. For example, when they used to go past, there's sermons of Ali, when they used to go past a church, for example, and then in them times they used to be like, oh, I wonder if there's a lot of fitna going on in those full, and then Imam Ali would be like, no, you should be. I wonder how much prayer is going on those worshipping the one God. So the idea being,
but that could be just there. Okay, that could be two friends just talking. Anyone could say that. I could be walking with somebody and say, "No, but I wonder what goes on in that place."
But the ideology is not to be negative about the other person. Is to try and keep everything in a positive state.
Well,
so if Rasulullah sat there saying, "Oh, Omar, I don't trust you," or I don't trust you, he won't have anyone in his corner. At the end of the day, being a judge of character, it's got to be you got to.
I think we've lost Mac. Have we still got Omar X?
Well, what I would say to that simply is, if a person lives and hangs out 24/7, who's your bodyguards, they say Abu Bakr and Omar were his bodyguards. They were with him in all the battles. They lived with him. I think there's marriage involved somewhere. And now, all of a sudden, Abu Bakr has to take over and say, hey, if he had even said beforehand, look, O Prophet of Islam, when you pass away, I want to be in charge. I want to be, and I'm sure the Prophet said, hey, fine, if that was the case. But nobody was bothered about it. And, you know, it's a tragedy that the Prophet of Islam,
There
50-year
was.
friendship, one of the
There
worst,
was
well, give
like
me this then. Okay, the
the
Prophet of
Qadir,
Islam
the
then,
Qadir, Khum al-Qadir. You know about the events of Khum al-Qadir?
no, I can't say I do.
And well, it's called Khum al-Qadir. On the way to the pilgrimage, on the last, obviously on the way, the Rasul's last journey, they stopped at a place called Qadir.
Kadir,
Yeah, Qadir.
okay.
Yeah, and this is where Rasulullah says, "If I am your Mawla, then Ali's your Mawla, and if I am the knowledge, Ali's the gatekeeper or the gate." Yeah, this is where these famous, even in the Sunni books, that have been said. So this is when Ali was obviously given now the position of successory. Now, I wouldn't say.
Well, just by
I
stating
mean,
that, that's a bit unfair, isn't it? That's a bit unfair.
well, it's an event that took place. Apparently,
But that
maybe
doesn't mean
very
if someone is the gateway of, do you say gateway of wherever you mentioned, then
doorway
what does
or
that really
gateway.
mean? Sorry? Heaven.
If no. Gate. When I say doorway or gate, meaning Ali's the key. Ali's the doorway entrance to the knowledge. If
But
I'm
that doesn't mean,
Rasulullah
yes,
explained himself to be the knowledge, and he said
yeah.
Ali to be the entrance to knowledge, for example, not
E-
or the key to
Well,
knowledge.
well, the Prophet also said, when oh Bilal, I had a dream that you were ahead of me walking in heaven. He also stated
Yeah,
that, which we know that
of
no
course.
one can go ahead of the Prophet when it comes to heaven. I believe it's the Prophet that's going to succeed, if that's the correct term for others. So this was a metaphoric statement that the Prophet made for Bilal, because some people were referring to Bilal, hey, you son of a slave, and so on. So he made this lovely statement, and so for Ali also, he made this lovely statement. That doesn't mean, hey, Ali, take charge when I'm gone, because he could have just simply said, Ali, take charge when I'm gone.
Okay, so now he did, and that's when at his deathbed he was told to hush up because he's delusional, and
So
this is
so the prophet, what does prophet mean? Prophet means someone who can prophesize, who can almost predict the future at times. Now, when the
sure.
prophet on his last moments is passing away, he decides, hey, I want Ali in charge. And then Omar and Abu Bakr, 50 years of friendship, 60 years of friendship, decide, hey,
But
hush
no,
up,
this is
we're gonna do
this
it.
is not. I just told you that on the way to his pilgrimage, on his last pilgrimage
Well,
that he was going to.
if you think that just by saying, Ali, you're the
No, but
gateway, that doesn't mean anything. Come on, be fair, Mac. What does that mean? If somebody says you're the gateway to knowledge or you're the gateway to anything, that doesn't mean, hey, after
okay,
me, you should be in
then
charge.
okay. So let me put it to you like this. So in Islam, you would consider your daughter, your sister, your mother as very you be protective in terms of making
Well,
sure no harm or anything
you would
comes
think
to
in
them, right?
any faith and non-faith, but okay, I understand what you mean.
No, but Islamically, you're a bit more inclined to be a bit more protective in their safety and stuff,
Well,
right?
everyone equally cares about their mother and wife and so on, I'm sure, but okay, I understand your point.
Okay. Well, there's a specific Iranian or Arabic word called ghayrat, which means extra possessiveness, right?
Yes,
You've heard of this word or not? Or are you
I
familiar with
believe it.
this word?
Yeah, it's the same word in Urdu, but I'm not
Okay. The
I'm not a
thing is,
supporter of it, but I understand.
okay. Now the funny thing is, you say you're Pakistani, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
In
my
Persia,
grandparents.
okay, now I've noticed I tend to say Persians tend to be a bit racist because they don't associate with Arabs because before the Prophet came, the Arabs used to bury daughters, right? So
Yeah.
based on these on so now the Pakistanis even nowadays in Iranian culture we don't have any I don't hear of much of honor killings, whereas in Pakistan it's a very common practice. In most
Well,
cases,
just because you don't,
no, I'm
just
just, I'm
because you
just
don't
getting,
hear about
I'm just,
them doesn't
I'm
mean that
getting,
they don't happen. Because we hear the stories of
of course.
extremism.
But I tend to hear
They
a
happen
lot
here in
more cases.
London. This
But
right in London, so
again, they tend to be from the Pakistani families, right?
well, I disagree respectfully. I think we have the problem of cousin
Okay.
marriages, forced marriages
I
all over the
apologize.
world.
I apologize.
But no, I do.
I may be wrong.
No. On the contrary, no, I accept that there's killings. I won't call them honor killing. I'll call them dishonor killings. And they happen
Fair enough.
in Pakistan, and I'm sure they happen all over the world. But there is an issue. There is a problem of this possessiveness. You correctly mentioned there is something's going on. Ironically, no one ever talks about it, and I
Sure.
believe one of
These
my
are also these are another fact that, another subject that should come to light and should be discussed rather than obviously discussed. But going back to my original point, now the reason why I'm making these points is so Rasulullah has come to address this, burying these Arabs, burying these daughters
Mhm.
of it's called, I think, ignorance due to Jahiliyyah. But Rasulullah, who was protective over his daughter, was willing to hand his daughter's hand in marriage to Ali. So considering that he's going to be protected and not any sort of akhlaq or any character to be wedded to his daughter because he's protected over her. Now, if he's that protected over his daughter, he would have the same sort of
but you
protectiveness
hold on a second.
over his
Hold on a
religion.
second.
Allow me just to finish. He would have the same sort of protectiveness over his religion that he would over his daughter. So if he was willing enough to give, but again, let me just finish and then you can. I just want to say
I want
that
to go
there
back to
is
the
a
point that you're speaking about right
yeah,
now. That's why I'm
yeah.
interrupting.
The
I think you're
okay,
being unfair by just
sure.
thinking the Prophet was somebody protective. People are protective of all
With his
faiths
religion, he was very
equally.
protective. He was
Yes. Now
very
you just
protective about
mentioned that he
religion.
was willing. He was willing to allow his daughter to marry whoever, Ali or whoever,
So,
and he was protective. Every man is protective. It's nothing
of course,
exclusive about Islam. Every person is like that. Now, just because
but
he allowed his daughter,
I'm trying to see if you would have allowed me to finish. So, if it's
Don't
it's
finish.
it's not the he was just protective. No, I'm getting you to understand that protectiveness that he would have over his daughter would have over same as his religion. So he would
well,
be
I know.
as protective about the religion as he would be with his daughter about his
No,
daughter
but you could
or
just
his.
simply say he was very protective. Now, that's what he's lived for. Yes, he is going to be
Yeah.
protective, but if he was so protective, then he should have just simply said, Ali, you're in charge. I believe the
Well,
problem here is, the problem simply is
that's
this.
where the difference is.
Omar,
That's what. Go
Farouk,
on.
Abu Bakr, Ali, they were like best friends. They didn't care who's in charge, who's not in charge. The Prophet of Islam didn't care. He just said state. He probably thought, hey, they'll sort it out themselves. And that was the end of it. That's why we don't have anything verbatim. Abu, you should be in charge. Omar, you should be. Ali, they weren't concerned. It was just like best friends. We did all this. Look where we came from. We were dying together in
But
Mecca. Look where
okay,
we are.
so if this wasn't the case in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, it does state that Ali waited 6 months before he actually gave his allegiance or his bay'ah to the Khalifate of Omar. Why did
Okay, I'll respond to that.
if Ali? Okay, go on. Yeah.
If one of my friends today becomes caliphate, or well, now you can't, but if someone equivalent, if there was a time and if I was there, if one of my
But
best
remember,
friends,
Rasulullah called him the doorway of knowledge, so he must know it. He must know it. So immediately,
no, not
it shouldn't.
necessarily.
It shouldn't take him 6 months because if
Well,
he is the door to knowledge, he should know this knowledge already. It shouldn't take him 6 months to
calling
ponder on.
the door of the knowledge or gateway of knowledge is simply this man is a person of knowledge. That doesn't mean the person knows everything. You know that what's going to happen. This man can prophesize what's going to happen in the future. And you know that doesn't mean
Not
that.
prophesize,
Regarding
no.
6 months, why it took Ali 6 months and to give the, I don't know what the term is, but to give his
Bay'ah or allegiance.
sorry,
Allegiance, bay'ah.
allegiance, yes, to Omar. It was simply because, you know, when you have a close friend, you don't need to. When someone is, you know, like Boris Johnson, his friends, they don't need to say, hey, you're the prime minister. He just is. The reason 6 months he gave his allegiance, perhaps he would never have given his allegiance, was because people started to talk. 6 months later, or around that time, rumors were swirling. Look, Ali didn't give his allegiance to Omar or to Abu Bakr or to whoever, so he's unhappy. So he came to those people, I think it was Omar, and said, listen, I'll give you allegiance, not because he didn't believe in the previous 6 months that, you know, this person was a good person. He believed the person was good. He didn't because earlier on he didn't feel he needed to, but when he did, it was because of rumors were swirling and people were like, he's unhappy, and to prove to them that he's not unhappy, he just came and gave them allegiance because they were buddies, they were all friends, and this is all just, you know, such a tragedy that, you know, such a separation took place.
Okay,
Gentlemen,
so
given all that we've heard, your side, the other side, is it possible to be a believing, practicing Muslim without focusing too much on all this? And is it impossible to embrace each other as brothers? I mean, you've come on here and you've been very civil, and I'm sure you're good friends anyway. And 99% of the time, you don't focus on this. And maybe it's a silly idea to have it as a debate topic if it's just going to spread division between people. But is it possible to accept each other's differences, put it to one side and say, I know that's what you believe, this is what we believe, but let's move forward together? Do you think that's possible? I know some people say never. What do you say? Start with Mac.
yeah, I believe, first of all, believing. I mean, I thank Omar for the millions and billions of Muslims already because of Omar, regardless of the Shias. So Omar did bring a lot of people to the religion. So even now, the way I would put it is, inshallah, everything that he's done would help him in the life after, and that's converted a lot of people to Islam and to praise the one and only mighty God, should we say? So he has brought a lot of benefits, and it will serve him correctly in the life after. But the only difference is, well, what he had done to, because Fatima Zahra in Sahih Muslim, it says, was not happy with Omar on before she passed away. Now, whether he reconciled this problem or this matter, but again, she is going back to the Rahman al-Rahim, so she has to have that kind of mentality or attitude towards Omar and Uthman Abu Bakr, even if they did her wrong. So ideally, that is the ideology that we're all meant to embrace. So now, without having a character like Omar, whether he was troublesome or not, Ali and Omar, I think, were beneficial for each other because one played a role. Whether, I mean, to say, Ali was, they call it Asadullah from a Sunni's point of view. So without Ali's sword, most of the actual wars in Muslims wouldn't have been victorious. But saying that, he did because of, well, Omar had a reputation as well. At the same time, with Omar's reputation, they were able to, well, for him to convince Omar must have had some sort of pure in his heart for him to pursue the religion in the name of Allah. And Ali did not stop him, meaning that obviously to some extent, Omar was doing the duty of Allah as he wills. So in that sense,
I beautifully put, Mac. Appreciate that. Omar X.
I would say, yeah. I mean, people need to keep in their minds that both sides have huge issues. We have people who um, are wife beaters and people who are troublesome, who beat their children severely. And, you know, we have all these people. Now, these are the people that would now go out and say, hey, Shias are so and so, hey, Sunnis are so and so. I think
Exactly. Very good.
majority of people are peaceful and respectful. Hardly any issues out there, I think. But you have these wars. I think in Iraq, they used to say, when Saddam Hussein's time, nobody would know who is a Shia or who is a Sunni. It wouldn't make any difference. People would marry into each other's families, and we have all these problems. I think Azerbaijan is a country where Sunni and Muslims pray in the same mosque. And, you know, it's a tragedy we have this, but on the Sunni perspective, I would say that Islam, it was pretty much over with when the prophet passed away. It was pretty much done. Now, after that, anything after that is hearsay. It doesn't particularly matter, you know, either way. They were buddies. They were not. You know, they had some issues. Friends have some issues, and we don't know. There's nothing verbatim. The prophet never said anything apart from 3 generations after me. There's going to be issues. So, you know, the first 3 generations, he didn't speak ill of them. He said after 3. So overall, it's peaceful. Today, we're peaceful. And I think, you know, in the future, if we just kind of put this to the side, I think 95% is exactly the same. I think it's 5% that is different. And I think I would say 1% is problematic. And as you know, it just takes the 1% to start some issues. But we should override it. When someone says bad things about Shia, we should say, hey, hold on, what the heck are you saying? Look, they're not all like this. I mean, I had the pleasure of going to Umrah with Sheikh Hamza Yusuf from San Francisco, California, and I spent 2 weeks out there with him. And one of my close friends from New Zealand that I stayed with for about 2 weeks, I had no idea he was Shia. You know, after 2 weeks, I only found out because he was going to Bahrain and his sister was in Iran, and that's when I asked him, "Oh, I said you must be Shia," and he said, "Yeah." So I had no idea the entire 2 weeks I lived with him that he was Shia. So, you know, it's something that, and I mentioned it because I knew him really well, and that's why I mentioned it. Ordinarily, I probably wouldn't have even mentioned it, but point is, we're almost exactly the same, but when you hear someone saying, hey, Sunnis do this, Sunnis do that, you should say, hey, hold on a second. That's not 99% of Sunnis. That's 1%. And similarly, on the other side, they should say only 1% do the bad. And it just takes a few to start trouble. And that's the few that we should be aware of.
I agree. Yeah.
Superb. Brian Cannot Tell saying in the chat, seems to me, once again, it comes down to who is in charge. Amazing to believe in a religion of service to others and fight to rule. Yeah, service to others is, I think, something we should all practice, isn't it? Something we should all strive for. And you met Hamza Yusuf then. How long ago was that?
Yeah, I randomly bumped into him once in 2008. And furthermore, then we arranged a trip, I think in 2014 or so it was. And it was very, it was a huge pleasure, very exciting being around that man. And I think he goes beyond Islam.
He came to Islam from the Greek Orthodox faith, I think. He grew up in the Greek Orthodox Church.
That's another thing we're winning. Islam is winning the conversion rate, and it probably upsets a lot of people, but something's going on in the world. There is this upsurge. We have a mosque here in Luton called the Islamic Center. When you go in there, every single person in there is of a European or of a Caucasian background, you know, so every single person.
Hamza Yusuf is a Sunni Muslim. Do you know which madhab he follows? Does he have one? Does he describe himself as a Sufi? I know this is a label that a lot of people give to others. It's not something that people don't tend to say they are Sufi themselves. It's not really a label people adopt themselves. It's a label others attach, right? But he would be a Sunni. Is that correct?
Well, he is certainly a Sufi, and he promotes it, and it's a nice way of life to live. Being in that Sufi, nice, relaxed, calm kind of attitude. But don't be fooled. Equally, I'm sure there's bad Sufis out there. I believe he's a Malaki. He's into that also, but the man has studied.
He,
It's
he
30
spent
years of
time
hard work.
in Mauritania, right? North Africa.
Yeah, I think in Morocco and then on to Mauritania. I had the pleasure
Okay.
of meeting his teachers also. But don't be fooled, this man studied. He spent, maybe 20, 30 years of studying. So he knows what he's talking about. He's not just,
Okay.
somebody off the streets. And, he's worthy of honor and respect. So whatever he says, I think has to be honored.
And the Maliki madhab is predominant in North Africa. Would you say, is it fair to say that is the Maliki madhab closer to, I know it's one of the four Sunni madhabs, is it perhaps closer to Shia in some ways? I can think of the fact that they pray with their arms by their side in Sadr, which is regarded as a Shia way of praying, but also the Malikis adopt that as well.
Do you know where this came from? Do you know where when they placed the hand on front of the chest came from?
You tell me where.
It was I think they saw it from the Shias, the Persians. Sorry, Persians. The Persians kings would address Omar in that way, and then they obviously liked it and take it on board. But the reason why you're not meant to pray with your arms out, because at the time of the idol worshipping, people tend to use or have their on their stomach or on their chest, and they would hide the statue in their palm. Whereas this is why it was said to pray with your arms by your sides. So this is where I mean, looking back, I mean, there are certain things I would agree with Shias and certain things I'd agree with Sunnis. But in the Quran, it does say, for example, it doesn't say wash your feet. It just says wipe your feet with water. But when you go into some of these, can I just finish? When you do actually go into some of these mosques, you think, oh, some of these feet do actually smell. So it is a good idea, perhaps, to wash your feet. You see what I'm saying? So it's not a bad idea in some instances, but you just got to weigh the pros and cons. And
is that another difference then? The wudu for the Shia is just to wipe the foot. Interesting.
Yeah.
Go on, Omar.
Well, I mean, these are just nitty-gritty things, Okay, fine. If you don't have to, doesn't mean that you won't. You may as well. You're there in the ablution section.
But it makes sense. Your feet, if they smell, you're eradicating the smell, and it's not becoming unpleasant for others. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people should use their own intellect in these matters, I think. But Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, he has a huge following in the Shia community also, I'm happy to state. So, it gives us hope that, someday perhaps, if we can eliminate the extremist cults, I guess, that we have, then, perhaps one day that the Shia and Sunni can be one.
Here's an interesting statement from Azmil Muzammil, who says, I am Salafi, I don't follow madhabs. Now, in trying to eradicate or consolidate the madhabs, the madhahib, to use the plural, have the Salafis not ironically created a new one?
Yeah, I mean, Salaf
could be a debate for another night.
Well, the Salafi movement, they're okay. They live in Saudi Arabia, a lot of them, and there's a lot of people on the other side here around the world that are Salafi, and I respect them, but I find them very extreme with respect. And I myself, I come from this Hanafi background, but it doesn't mean I accept everything or I follow.
Can I just say, who the teachers of Hanafi, Maliki, and you do know is that we call him Ja'far Sadiq, Imam Ja'far Sadiq, and at the time of Ja'far Sadiq, he was the teacher of Maliki Hanafi. So if you actually look into who actually taught these schools of thoughts, you'll see it leads back to the sixth Imam, which is Ja'far Sadiq.
Yeah, I mean, fine if they were imams, they were good at what they did, and we should take into consideration what they thought, and we don't have to blindly follow them because they couldn't agree amongst themselves. I think there's huge differences between them, but then at the same time, it's basically raise your hands keep your hands down. You know, what's the big deal? I know the Salafi friends are really anti-madhab, I hear, but the the Salafis have their own issues. We have extremism on our side. From the Sufi side, no, you don't have a single terrorist act on the planet Earth that's committed by Sufis. You know, this is all coming from that side. Conveniently, everyone ignores even the
You
9/11
mean
hijackers.
Salafis? Meaning
Even
Salafis?
even the hijackers were from that sect. So there's something in that sort of group that they, and I guess us as well, collectively need to really re-evaluate and think, hey, why is every action coming from this side? And there's so many other sects, 73 or how many there are, perhaps a lot more. We don't have this coming from them. This is only coming from us. So someone needs to really sit down and start to think about what they can do to rescind this type of bad behavior, if you ask me.
I agree.
Well, whether you work outside or you work indoors and you've got an inside job, 9/11 is obviously a day we'll never forget. But I want to welcome you guys back on Wednesday, possibly, when we'll be going esoteric Wednesday nights. From now on, we will be talking about UFOs, jinn, possession, all the crazy stuff we'll do on Wednesday, and the more serious stuff we're going to do it on Friday. So anyone that wants to talk about a topic, feel free to email me or leave something in the comments. Piety Momentum is saying, what happened to Sunni Islam in Bahrain, UAE, Kosovo, making ties with other countries? A Sufi is not a sect. That's a very good point by K. Considine. I think tasawwuf is the term of striving for purification of the soul, and this is something that the Sufi Muslims, if they are a group, are focusing on. Considine saying Sufism is not a sect; it's an area. Just as you have different focuses, for example, in martial arts, you've got grappling, you've got striking. It doesn't mean that you're still a fighter; it's still the same objective, right? As Muhammad is saying, yes, I agree. There are Salafis who become extremists due to deviation and political reasons, but that does not mean Salafism is misguided. Look, each to their own. On this show, we like to give as much freedom of speech as we are legally permitted to do.
Well,
if you swear in your comments, Google will block it, not me. I tend not to delete anything anyone says unless it's absolutely ridiculous. So let's try and keep it clean and respect each other's opinions. We've had two gentlemen come on tonight disagree, but they've respected each other. Go on, Omar.
Sufism, actually, when I was first introduced to Sufism, I loved it immediately. And when I saw the movie Romancing of the Stone back in the 80s, that's my first kind of experience with Sufism, when Michael Douglas is with and I think it's Jewel of the Nile also, I think the second part of that. And as he's and the last words of that movie were Sufis rule, and they seem to be peaceful and have their own thing going on. So, you know, it's a nice relaxed way, kind of almost like a hippie kind of thing.
Isn't that a religion of spiritual, but they're more in tune with the spiritual side of things?
Well, we all need to really sit back, close our eyes for 1 hour a day and just think, what the heck is going on? We're on a little
meditate.
We're on a little tiny, ball in the middle of bloody nowhere, and NASA sent out a rocket 60 years, and it's been traveling at, I don't know, 400 miles an hour, and it still hasn't reached anywhere, and it's still going on.
The Hubble telescope, you mean?
We are nothing really, if you think. We're just a speck.
Mind blown.
Yeah, so we're literally just we're nothing in the whole, in the grand scheme of things. We're absolutely nothing. So we just sit back, relax, and that's what we should do. Get in touch and do yoga and so on. That's basically what it is. With nice, lovely turbans on. I don't see any harm in
meditate.
it.
Meditate.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It has been Lessons for Life, and we'll do it all again soon, Wednesday night, 10 p.m.